I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kip Lewis, and I'm an assistant principal here, and I'm very pleased to be part of the Healthy KP Substance Use Prevention Coalition. And we started a year ago with a vision of trying to help overcome the issue of substance use among adolescents. So, without further ado, I'm actually going to start the presentation. I gave you guys some seats out front there. You're welcome to turn around if you like, but you're welcome to sit in the front row too. And we're going to shut off the lights, so prepare your eyes. We're going to just give you a little bit of data and a little bit of an idea of why we're here tonight and who's here. So here's our agenda. And we had opportunity to visit the service provider tables. We're going to do a little bit of an introduction. I'm going to give you some data on some of the information that you're probably curious about. We're going to have a keynote speaker, Jim Derrick, two keynote speakers, apologies. Jim Derrick and Jennifer Knight Levine, who are here from the SAFE Coalition. We're extremely excited to have them. We're going to have a half-hour, 45-minute panel discussion, answering questions that you as parents submitted to us. There were a lot of kind of duplicate questions, so we're using approximately 10 questions to guide the evening with some additional questions to elaborate further on some of the answers. And then afterwards, we'll have time to visit the service provider tables as well. So why are we here tonight? We're here because it's very evident to everybody that there is an epidemic going across the country right now in all high schools. It's not just KP. It's across a lot of the high schools, and we are trying to figure out ways as a school to be able to help support the students to get through these issues and to overcome them. And it's a monumental task, and we were overwhelmed by it. So when Superintendent Zinni came into the system, he came up with the idea of trying to apply for a grant, start a coalition, and see if we can make it a community effort. And we're really proud to say that we think the train is rolling down the tracks with that. So that's why we're here tonight. Healthy KP. It's a little bit small maybe, but let's see if I can zoom in for you. I'll read it off to you. The prevalence of alcohol, tobacco, drug, and substance use and the rising escalation of vaping among our youth became a hot topic of concern within the community. To address these community concerns, the Keynote Regional School District invited community members to discuss the ongoing vaping epidemic within the schools. This was a little over a year ago. Some of you may have been in attendance, as well as concerns with other substance use that plague our youth. With the guidance of the superintendent, school administrators, outside consultants, and concerned community members, the Healthy KP Substance Use Prevention Coalition was formed in the fall of 2018. We do have monthly meetings on Wednesday nights, and this is a recruiting event for us as well. We'd love to have people join us. We've recently had a couple of students start to join us, and their perspective has opened up the conversation for us and really enlightened us as adults. These are some of our board members and some of the general members that show up on a monthly basis. You might recognize some of the names. They come from all different sectors in the community, and one of the efforts that we have is to write for our national grant, federal grant, to bring in even more staffing to try to support the students. And in order to do that, you have to have people commit to being a sector representative and come to a certain amount of meetings and events and get involved to a certain extent. And so a lot of these names up here have made that commitment, and they're showing up to meetings, and they're doing a lot of behind-the-scenes work to make things happen that sometimes we don't necessarily see. This is our vision and our mission statement. We spent some time actually trying to figure this out. We looked at other visions and mission statements from other coalitions and tried to really boil it down to what we thought was important for the students of King Philip and for the Tri-Town community, which is actually a really important side note. We also made the decision that we were going to support any student within the Tri-Town community, even if it's not a KP student. So if you have a student, maybe you have one student at KP and one at Zavarian, we wanted to make sure that you knew that you're welcome to come and seek our help regardless. Our vision is really simple. KP youth living substance-free. Mission, empower the KP community to live a healthy, substance-free life through the youth leadership, education, training, policy, and support. And I was kind of reviewing this, putting this together, and realized we've actually already hit a few of these little indicators, and I think we're really doing a nice job trying to tackle this mission statement, really make it come to life and to really live in the community. So I have a saying, it takes a village. A lot of the times we work with parents and students that maybe get caught using substances or something happens, and it can turn into a challenging or uncomfortable conversation because you really have to kind of have some real conversation. And many times the initial feeling is, what is the school doing about it? What is the school doing about that? And we just realized that the problem was just too overwhelming, and we had to do something to try to partner up. Really proud to say that we partnered with the SAFE Coalition, Jim and Jen, and the Healthy KP Coalition is up and running, and the school has been doing an exceptional job of trying to make sure that this community coalition can live and breathe within the walls of the school. And we're really excited about that. A little bit about the SAFE Coalition. It's a regional coalition of community partners in western Norfolk County, serving Franklin, Foxborough, Mansfield, Medway, Millis, Norfolk, Plainville, Walpole, Rentham, and surrounding towns. They've come together to provide pathways for support, education, treatment options, and coping mechanisms for those affected by substance use disorder. And they do so by empowering those affected, including their families, with the tools necessary to succeed on their journey to recovery. They understand that while I can't, we can. And they've recently opened up a beautiful office in Norfolk, right down the street at the intersection of 115 and 1A. And if you haven't had a chance to see it, it's a really great place. They have a special room separate for the Hidden in Plain Sight exhibit. And I don't want to spoil the thunder. They'll be able to explain a little bit more about it themselves. So here's some data from the Metro West Youth Adolescent Health Survey. And this is done every 2 years, and all the students take it, and it allows them to do an anonymous survey to give us a little bit of information about what's going on. Some of the preconceived notions and misperceptions are that it's, they're going to lie, and the students will say that they're not going to tell the truth on everything. And there are mechanisms built into the data so that they actually would take those answers out. They can figure out which answers don't match up and which ones don't belong, and they just disregard that information. Over 26,000 students take it in the state of Massachusetts every 2 years. That gives you a nice, deep bucket of information to go through and know that it's good data. So there's three main drugs that they look at: alcohol, marijuana, and vaping. And the survey does a bunch of other information as well, but just for the sake of tonight, this is what we're going to look at. Lifetime, when they say lifetime, they're referring to that the student has ever tried it even once. So this is a brief trend in the key indicators, and I highlighted in yellow the three main ones: electronic vapor product use, lifetime alcohol use in the middle, and marijuana use at the bottom. So if you look at the 2018 data over to the far right, we had 1,136 students out of 1,400 take it. 40.5% of those students says they have tried vaping. 44.3% have tried alcohol, and 31% have tried marijuana once in their life, is what they're saying. Lifetime use of alcohol, marijuana, and nicotine vaping. Have ever tried it? So this is lifetime substance use by grade. I put a couple of boxes up here in red that kind of give you some notes. Cigarettes, electronic vapor products, alcohol, marijuana. So electronic vapor products, I noted that 46% of 10th graders last year, so current juniors, reported that they had used a vape product at some point in their life. 55% of seniors. So the one on the far left is 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. So 46 and 55. I just thought that was kind of notable that there was a little bit of a jump there. You'll notice too that this goes from 25% as a freshman to 55. That's 2 times. It doubles by the time they're a senior. Alcohol use, 23% as freshmen, 63% have tried it as a senior. That's triple by the time that they are a senior. And also triple on marijuana. 13% of freshmen reported having used it, with 49% as seniors saying that they've tried marijuana. This is just a trend, lifetime trends of the same three things. Cigarettes in red, vape in blue, alcohol green, purple, marijuana. Just a quick note right there in the red circle, you see a little bit of an uptick over the last 2 years for both vaping devices and marijuana. That's probably in relationship to the recent legislation legalizing marijuana. National trends, so this compares the nation, the region, and Massachusetts. Quick note, KPHS is at or below national data in all three major categories. So we are at or below the use of electronic vape, alcohol usage, and marijuana. Again, KP's on the left, Metro West is the next one, Massachusetts, and then the nation. So the nation, 60% of students have reported trying alcohol at some point, KP students 44%, and marijuana 31 and 36 for the national. Current use, this means, when they say this, they mean that this child that reported that they have tried it in the last 30 days when they took the survey. Vaping, alcohol, marijuana, triple for vaping, 16% to 45% when they were a senior. Freshman year for alcohol, 10% up to 43%. That's 4 times as much. So that's saying that in the last 30 days after taking that survey, that 43% of seniors had said that they had tried alcohol in the last 30 days when they took the survey. And then with marijuana, 10% up to 34% as seniors. So this is specifically for vaping. This is information and data specifically to vaping. And one of the categories that they added here is perceived risk. So students say, I think that it's dangerous or I don't think it's dangerous. In general, approximately 65% of students in KV don't think that vaping is risky. 65% reported that they don't think it's risky. That's an average, roughly an average. I was a Spanish teacher. So 72%, 66, 67, and 59 for seniors. So that's roughly 65% of the students altogether reported that they don't think that vaping is risky. Moderate, I think they use the language moderate or great risk. Current vape use on school property in the past 30 days, 20% seniors. Current vape past 30 days, use in the past 30 days, that's just in general, not necessarily in the school, 45%. Access to vape products. So this is saying, where are they actually getting it from? What are they reporting to us of where they get the vaping products from? So the biggest part of the pie is 30% said that they borrowed them from somebody else, and 24% said that they gave somebody else money to buy them. So in total, that's 54% are either borrowing or getting money and giving money to somebody else. I can say that, the students in the room will tell you that we're in the bathrooms a lot to try to do something about it. We're trying to do a lot about it. It might not appear that way, but we do. We address as many of those situations as we can possibly keep up with. And I think that the majority of the students that I interviewed and asked them, forget about discipline or anything like that. Can you kind of tell me a little bit more about your particular situation and why you're using vaping nicotine devices? And where you get them from. A lot of them do say, I just show up maybe. I think they get a message and one student has it and then 4 will show up. But I also would like to point out that whatever's happening in the school, I would venture to guess that it's probably happening in the home as well, right? Because it's so easy to hide. Students don't smoke cigarettes in the school anymore, and they rarely smoke marijuana because it gives off such a strong odor that they're going to get caught right away. The vaping allows them to be able to do it wherever they want. And I'm going to show you a slide in a second that kind of captures that. So some of the other categories, bought them in a store in a town where I live, 11%. Bought them in a store in another town, 8%. Got them on the internet, 3%. Person 18 or over gave one to me. I took them from a store or another person, so stealing it. And 13% said other. I don't know. Locations of vapor product use at. categories are in the classroom, in the cafeteria or lunchroom, in the locker rooms, in the hallways, in the bathroom, in the library, outside on school property. Which brings me back to what I was just saying a second ago, is that there's this idea that it's only really happening in the school, but the truth is that they're doing it 100% of the time, which means that they're doing it everywhere in your household as well. Or not your household, but in their own household, if they are doing it. So just a couple of quick notes. 47% of KP students reported that they did it in the bathrooms, 36% in the Metro West area, so we're above the Metro West area. 46% also said that they did it on outside on school property. So it's kind of interesting. I know it was that the range of places that students bathe is everywhere. Alcohol use, alcohol by gender. They do a gender slide for all the different pieces, but there was over 40 slides, so we can only really include so much in order to get to the panel discussion. Lifetime drinking, ever, female, male on the right, female on the left, 45% females reported that they've tried it, 43% male. Currently drinking in the last 30 days, 25% of the students reported. So whatever 25% of 1,400 kids is a substantial portion, saying that they had drank in the last 30 days. Binge drinking is its own separate category, and have been drunk. Alcohol use by grade. Note the highest numbers of students drinking are also of the age to be driving. This is a really important thing to note. So you'll see the upward trend on all of them up to the 12th grade, and the highest numbers, lifetime drinking ever was 63%. Current drinking within the last 30 days, 43%. Binge drinking, been drunk, and again, they are driving, a lot of them. So that's a super bad combination. National trends, alcohol use by grade. KP is at or below the national data on this. Lifetime drinking, we are at 44%, 60% for the national average, 25 for current, and 30 for the national. So I hate to be rushing through this, but I want to make sure we have enough time for it. Access to alcohol by grade. This is an interesting one. So at a party, from a friend, so this is where they got it from, where they use the alcohol. From home, with parent or guardian knowledge. 34% of freshmen, 25, 24, 32% of seniors reported. So approximately 30% of our students reported that they drink with their parents. Just a notable idea there. I'm not judging, just saying that it is a notable point. I bought it with a fake ID. I bought it without a false ID. Someone I know over 21 gave it to me. I asked a stranger to buy it for me. 14% of freshmen said that they asked a stranger to buy them alcohol. My friends, or I bought it from a delivery service, which I didn't even realize that was something that existed. And my friends or I bought it online from another type of website. Marijuana use, last category of marijuana use by gender. 65% of students think it is easy. 65% of female students and 66% of male students think it is easy or fairly easy to obtain marijuana. Have an interesting note. Males are 15% less likely to perceive a risk. So female students said, 15% more female students said that it's risky to smoke marijuana than males. Marijuana use by grade. Lifetime use, seniors 49%, current marijuana use 34%. Think it would be fairly easy or very easy to obtain. 80% of seniors said that it would be very easy to obtain. Perceived risk of harm using marijuana. 70% of freshmen said that they perceive it as harmful. 32% of seniors. So a noticeable decline. So the increase in use as they get older, and the decrease in belief that it's harmful as they're using it. Trends of marijuana use across 10 years. I just thought this was a notable slide as well. Trending up since legalization, roughly around 2016. You see it start to climb back up again. From 2008, the 2008 numbers seemed odd to me. They're a little bit on the high end for every single category. But then as we came across the years, they started to plateau. access to marijuana by grade. So I was able to get a party from a friend. I bought it with fake ID. Freshmen on the left, seniors on the right. 72% of juniors said that they got it from a friend, but not at a party. Sorry, I bought it from somebody else, very high. So that's the second highest column. And the percentages are 12, 19, 22, 8. They had it from home without parent guardian knowledge. And then there's also a category that they got marijuana from home with parent or guardian knowledge. We do get that from time to time where the parents have a different outlook on it, and that makes the conversation really challenging. But ways marijuana is used by grade. These are the different ways that kids have tried marijuana, which I thought was also kind of a notable slide because, going back to the 60s or whatever, it was just marijuana. But now there's all sorts of different versions of edible things, concentrates, a lot of different ways to consume it, including the vaping as well. So there is a little bit of an overlap there where students are using vape products that are strictly nicotine, which are really, really amazingly doing some damage to them. You can actually visibly see sometimes that their complexion changes, their voices start to change, they become very jittery. So whatever's in the vaping nicotine devices they're so toxic that it's actually changing the character of the student and the way that they talk to you and the way that they behave, and it's very noticeable. Just some interesting numbers there with types of lifetime marijuana use by grade and the types of things. So this was, when you came in, we gave you, we'd really appreciate it if you could fill out. It doesn't have to be tonight, you can do it electronically. We thought maybe this would be the easiest way to do it. You could actually just take that card or write this down and then you just enter that address and it will bring you right to the survey. So I want to thank you all for listening to me as I review data from a screen. That's not really a lot of fun. And we can go ahead and we're going to adjust your eyes. We're going to turn the lights back on. And I'd like to introduce our two featured keynote speakers and read you their quick biographies. Jim Derrick is the Vice President of the SAFE Coalition and is a parent who knows the devastating impact of substance use disorder firsthand. In 2015, his son nearly lost his life to this disease. He began to speak publicly about his family's experience in the hopes that others may be encouraged to step forward and seek help as well. He became involved with the formation of SAFE and in October of 2015 was elected as the first president of the organization. Jim serves as on the Franklin Public Schools Substance Use Task Force and is a volunteer meeting facilitator for Learn to Code. Jennifer Knight Levine is the new executive director of SAFE Coalition and is a graduate of Franklin High School. We won't hold that against her. And Framingham State, where she began her career in the field of mental health in 2008. Starting in Massachusetts, she worked with adults in recovery from mental illness and later worked with adolescents in the foster care system in Southern California. During her time in California, her work primarily focused on implementing a groundbreaking 3-year health and wellness state research contract dedicated to developing alternative holistic therapies to encourage behavioral and emotional self-regulation, increasing family relationships, and decreasing the use of psychotropic medication. Upon moving back to Massachusetts, she returned to working with adults in recovery and is dedicated to supporting those in the community who are affected by opioid addiction. So without further ado, I'd like to ask you for a warm welcome for both Jim and
Thank you very much, Kip, and to Healthy KP, what a great organization. As a parent, I know I would just, I'm so thrilled to have had this in the schools. When I was going through some of what I've been through, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. So I applaud you and your superintendent and all of the staff and volunteers that you have. One of the things that it's difficult to be introduced after Jen's lengthy resume. My qualifications to be here, hi Chris, are dad. That's my resume, but I see parents smiling at me because it's a hell of a resume, right? Lived experience is what I have to share with you. So just to back up a little bit and share with you I helped form the SAFE Coalition after Jennifer had founded it with our state representative in an environment that was heavily opioid overdose rich. In fact, 1 month we lost 5 young people in Franklin to an overdose, and that's really was the impetus for starting this coalition. It was courageous people from all sectors that came together and said, enough is enough. And coalition building does work. And I don't have to tell you that, Kip, and I certainly don't have to tell you, Superintendent, that it was a long history of coalition building back in Avon, and we spoke beforehand, but it really, really works. Everybody's got to show up, though. So I'm so glad to see so many people here in the audience. So my purpose tonight, in the roughly 8 minutes I have left, is to share with you some of my experience in the hope, again, that you'll hear something that may resonate or may cause you to reach out to us or to me and say, I'd like to get some more information. I'd like some help. What happened to me was that I, like many of you in the audience, have children. I have 3 boys, and one of my sons was showing signs of, well, let's just say maladjustment, okay? Anxiety, those types of things. And I noticed it as he was very, very young. As he grew older, what I didn't realize I was witnessing, I thought it was a behavioral problem, turned out to be increasing use of, at the time, marijuana, okay? I don't know that, and like many people, I'm caught flat-footed. I have no information. There are no community coalitions. I just didn't have anywhere to turn, and this problem's getting more and more and more severe. And I am caught in a wilderness of no answers. First of all, I didn't want to go to my neighbors and say, hey, I just want to let you know my son's smoking weed. You guys know what I can do? Stigma is huge, right? I'm happy to hear from parents that reflect back to me that some of the work we're doing is working to reduce that stigma. And I see so many young people here, and I'm so glad for that because they're such an important part of this. After all, that's why we're here. Much of the conversation about young people, about mental health, and some of the issues that used to be so stigmatized is now coming to the surface, and that's going to help. That's going to help everybody be healthier, and that's why we're here. So I'm stumbling around in an atmosphere. What I don't realize I'm witnessing is my son becoming increasingly and increasingly sick, both mentally and physically. And this goes on, and I'm fast-forwarding a bit. There were a lot of warning signs, some of which I paid attention to, and some that I tried to ignore. Now, I submit to you that anybody that has a child that's sick with what could be a terminal illness wouldn't ignore it. If your son or daughter, God forbid, had leukemia or had diabetes, you wouldn't turn away and say, well, there's probably nothing to see here. You'd zoom into Boston and get some testing done. You'd have an army of people. You'd have casseroles, balloons. You'd be supported in the community. I found myself in a position where my son definitely had what could become a terminal illness, and I had no support whatsoever. Okay? I went to the pediatricians. No fault of theirs. They were flat-footed. Google it. Google addiction services. Well, anybody that tries that today might get a little bit of a different answer, but what I got was Malibu beaches and a whole bunch of really nice $100,000 for 3 months to send somebody. Really nothing that I could put my teeth into. I certainly couldn't speak with the police, and I sure as heck wasn't going to go to the schools, because of the ramifications that I thought would come down on my family and, more importantly, my son, who I was hoping somehow would be able to get out of this problem, which was like asking the totally impossible. So I was completely flat-footed. Thank God we have a coalition and now coalitions that are available, which do one really important thing. If Jim Derrick is walking around in Franklin or any of the communities that we serve now and walks into a police station, Bill McGrath will say, I know exactly where you can call. Chief Lynch in Franklin will say, I know where to go. We can help you. In fact, they're even more active partners than that because they, rather than arresting their way out of this situation, they help people into treatment and they help people. So we're trying to create an army of people that are educated, schools included, clergy, and on and on and on, so that when somebody's in this position, there's a community of support to wrap around them. Some very important things that I want to share with you in the very little bit of time I have left. What are some of the signs that I missed along the way? First of all, I thought it was all about the drugs. Okay? Just say no. Ronald Reagan, a hero of mine at the time. Just say no. That's going to work, right? Does it work, kids? You don't have to tell me. It doesn't work. I know it doesn't work. Lecturing didn't work. Screaming didn't work. Grounding didn't work. It wasn't the drug, dummy. It's the feelings, thoughts, and emotions that caused my son to think that he needed something outside of himself to anesthetize what was going on inside of him. And I missed it, and there isn't a day that I don't regret that.
Do you know the age when you started seeing the anxiety when you started this problem? That was prior to
7 years old. 7 years of age, my son started presenting with panic attacks. So who wouldn't want to alleviate some of that pain, right? So, I mean, I've got a ton of those. That's just one, and we'll talk more about it in the panel. Just one of the symptoms that I missed and signs that I missed along the way that I regret missing. But it all led to an increasing problem. Okay, and I'm going to talk a lot more about marijuana, but I'm here to tell you, I'm here to witness right now, it is not a safe drug, okay? It is being, I'm pointing to children, I'm pointing to all of us right now, we are being marketed to by big tobacco and big conglomerates right now. It is the Wild West out there. High potency THC wreaks havoc on underage and young people's brains. It just does. And that's not just anecdotal anymore. There's plenty of evidence-based research out there to say that it's causal, likely causal, for psychosis, and I'm seeing the psychologist nod, for potentially adding to bipolar and other issues. But I didn't have any of these tools. So my son's problem continues to escalate. So here's a problem he's self-medicating for with a substance that's likely like pouring gasoline on fire. He doesn't know that. He just knows he feels better in the moment. I don't know that because I'm totally unprepared. I don't even know what the underlying issues are. And it all leads to an increasing problem, which doesn't end, but escalates beyond marijuana to other substances, hard drugs, okay? Now we're talking about opioids. Now we're talking about benzos, Xanax. And now we know we have a problem and we can't stop it. It's out of control. And it all ends, one part of the story ends with an ejection from a car doing 100 miles an hour down Lincoln Street and a likely overdose. And he's thrown from the sunroof of the car, lands in a field 150 feet away, and by the grace of God, an off-duty EMT by the name of Matt Hendon from Millis finds him and resuscitates him and gets him into a life flight and spends 2.5 months in a coma. And during that time, that's when I met Jen Knight and the rest of these people that were organizing. You talk about serendipity. And I said, holy Jesus, these guys actually want to talk about this. I've been fighting this all along for this time. He's at Worcester UMass Medical. And now we got to get him into rehab. And now I have people that are actually going to help me do that. And I got to tell you, it was the most frightened I've ever been. It was the most out of control I've ever felt. And I'm not here to suggest that every kid that starts out on that chart vaping or using weed becomes an addict. It's just not true. What I am here to suggest is that if we don't become more educated as a group, and I include anybody in this group, including children, if we don't become educated, it's at our own peril. We've got legalized marijuana now all around, popping up. The messaging is horrific. And I often get this question when we speak in high schools from kids, and I would have asked the same question. Hey, Mr. Derek, are you against weed? You know what I'm against? Unsustainable, unhealthy behavior. Unsustainable mental health. Unsustainable physical health, meaning it's not sustainable. The stuff that we're marketing now, which is high potency THC and edibles and all that stuff, it's just not sustainable. And so how does that fit into my story? When I look into the eyes of our youth today, there is not one young person that I look at and I don't think of my experience. And it literally shakes me. And I'm saying with the parents, because I know what it feels like. Not exactly to be your age. I was your age not that long ago, 1978, in high school. Freebird was our graduation song. With the 15-minute guitar solo. But truthfully, it's a different environment. And when I speak with police officers and they tell me that trying to handle a young person that's been dabbing or waxing 98% THC, we have officers here, it's not weed. we're being sold a bill of goods about that. This is not just weed. I never want to hear those two words come out of people's mouths. It's just weed. So anyway, you probably get my bias here. But what I do want to do is offer you this. I do have lived experience. I've been working with the coalition now for 5 years, so I have some other people's lived experience that I've accumulated. I am more than willing to share my story in the hopes that it will help somebody else. I am more than willing to share my lessons learned now that we have tools and we have great people like Jen Knight and the other rest of the board of directors at SAFE and people in the community that can help. Nobody should do this alone. Nobody, if you're suffering with a loved one at home that is suffering from either addictive behavior, mental health issues, don't do it alone. I thought parenting was tough until I ran into this problem. There is nothing more difficult. But doing it alone, I submit to you, is impossible. I tried. And here's the final. One day I woke up and I thought to myself, you've been trying to treat this now for the better part of 15 years. What makes you qualified to treat it? Love? Nope. If love could fix it, he would have been cured a long time ago. It is literally as having him sitting at home on the couch because I was too either ashamed or not knowledgeable enough to get him into professionals' hands. It would be like me trying to fix diabetes in him. The mental anxiety and depression is so real and palpable. For me to try to fix that is literal insanity, and I tried to do it for a long time. So again, my message is please reach out. We've got wonderful resources. We're more than happy to help any way we can. And my cell phone's on my card, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody. Thank you, guys.
Everybody, my name is Jen Knight. If anybody had told me 15 years ago that I would be stepping foot in KP from Franklin, I would be like, absolutely not, no way. But I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having us. We're actually really excited to be here for a few different reasons, but I think the biggest reason for Jim and I to be excited to be here is that your school department recognizes a concern, and the school department cares so much about the students that they were willing to develop a coalition called Healthy KP and create opportunities for recovery and support instead of ignoring the problem and pushing it away. And that is amazing. I have a 13-month-old, and I hope that any school system that my child is in has the dedication, the awareness, and the expertise around the table to raise their hand and say, we need some kind of support. So I am so thankful for all of you in the school system to really say, please, let's talk about this. Let's make this a more open topic. Jim shared his personal story of the things that were going on in his household. And unfortunately, Jim is not alone in any of the events that took place. We, 5 years ago at the SAFE Coalition, we're not the SAFE Coalition. I had come back from California, realized there was a real concern in our community because a lot of the folks that I grew up with and went to school with had passed away due to drug use and substance use. And I can tell you that when I was playing with them on sports teams, or going to the movies with them, or going to parties with them, I never would have imagined that I would be coming back and doing their funerals. I promise you that. I played girls ice hockey. We started out with 10 girls on our team, and there were only 8 of us left on this earth, and that was because of addiction. And truly, if anyone said to me that in the locker room, not all of you would be here for a 50-year anniversary, I wouldn't believe it. So many of us came together who have been impacted by addiction and said we needed to start something, we needed to start a support group. And that one support group led to more folks coming together, more stakeholders in the community being impacted, and the SAFE Coalition was born. The SAFE Coalition was born absolutely out of the opioid epidemic. We realized that there was a concern in our communities and we wanted to do something about it. Well, 5 years down the road, here we are. And if anyone had said to me 5 years ago, hey, in 5 years you're going to be talking to high school students not about intense addiction to opiates or benzos, but about vaping, I would say, what's a vape? Because 5 years ago, we did not know what a vape was. We didn't know what a vape cartridge was. We were talking about popcorn lung. We were talking about maybe some dipping, some alcohol use, certainly, but not vaping. So for all of you who are here, you were caught off guard, and so were we. And we do this for a living. So we took the time over the past few years to really sink our teeth into what is vaping, how do we educate, what's the root cause of vaping behavior. And what we've really come to recognize is that some of the language that we as supportive folks in the community were using, prevention, is important, but it's certainly not the whole piece. Yes, we want to prevent all of our children from any kind of harmful or risky behavior. But really what we need to be looking at is education and healthy family relationships and dynamics. So many of the youth that we work with share with us that the reason why they have increased their drinking, or they've increased their vape use, or they've increased their marijuana THC use is because they felt out of place. They felt like they needed to use to be part of. You saw in the incredible graphics that you showed us that many folks coming in as freshmen believed that these items were harmful. By the time they got to their senior year, they were using them. And so how do we understand the recognition that something is harmful, but the need to still use? And that comes with healthy relationships and education. What we've tried to do is really pull this back, meet with families, find out what's been going on, meet with youth, find out what's going on. Why do you feel like you need to use to be part of a group? How do you feel when you do use? How do you feel, more importantly, when you don't use? And these things over the past year have really come to light. 6 months ago, over the summer, Jim and I were getting calls on our support line from parents who were really concerned because they went on summer vacation with their families and they found vapes in their child's luggage. Or their kids went to sports camp or music camp, and the report back was that their performance in some capacity, usually having to do with their lungs, was not as great as it was when they showed up. And typically when you're spending a good amount of money to go to a camp, you want to develop those skills, not deplete them. And that was something that was happening. So at the beginning of the school year, Jim and I took a real focus on how do we talk to kids about vaping, how do we talk to parents about vaping. And what we soon realized is that it's not just vaping. It's not just alcohol use. It's everything else that goes along with that. And what I mean by that is, how do students or our children feel like they're part of a family, or they're part of a community, or they're part of a sports team? And so while Jim and I were creating something that you'll all get, a manual of 5 topics to talk to your children about and 5 questions to ask your pediatrician, the vaping ban went into effect. A week after the vaping ban in Massachusetts went into effect, we started getting calls from school systems and our parents. And the conversation was, our kids are angry and frustrated, or they're not showing up, or they don't want to clean their room, and we think there's more substance use going on. And upon further investigation, we realized that just like adults, when adults try to quit smoking, there's an irritability, there's a frustration, there's a desire to eat more, there's a desire to sleep more or sleep less. I think all of us failed to recognize a few months ago that the amount of our children using vape products was pretty high. The amount of our children who had to have vape products taken away from them because of the ban then caused a detox effect. And so all of our children were detoxing in the classrooms, at home, on the weekends, at sports programs. And so what may have looked like real serious behaviors, adolescent behaviors, was really a detox from nicotine. Now, parents in the room, I'm sure some of you have smoked before, maybe you still do, maybe you've tried to quit. I think that we can all agree that if we had an adult loved one who smoked for a long time, who tried to quit, we would be so supportive. What do you need? The patch, the inhaler, what doctor can I bring to you? Smoking cessation groups, no problem. Oh, you've relapsed again, no problem, you can start again tomorrow. We would be so accepting of helping our adult loved one quit smoking in the way that felt comfortable to them. And what all of us fail to recognize is that all of our children who already are managing an outrageous amount of hormone changes and shifts biologically, we're now dealing with detoxing from a pretty intense substance that even as an adult is challenging. So we've learned a lot of lessons even in the past 3 months. We've learned that we, folks who support people in the community, need to take a very wide lens in substance use. We need to continue to investigate and talk to those who feel the most vulnerable, which are our youth, and I talk to the parents who feel the most frustrated. Because if you have a child who's really vulnerable and you have parents who are really angry, the only thing that's going to happen is frustration in the household. And guess what? Teenagers need the most love and support and connection. And how the heck do we do that? So, as I said, we've been working on this for the past few months. And a few questions I really want to highlight to you. When we go and we've been working with families, often the child of the family will say, well, I didn't know that mental health ran in my family. I didn't know, Dad, that you have been going to AA every Wednesday night when I thought that you were playing poker with your friends. Or I didn't know that this was a cultural difference and my grandparents speak another language and I didn't understand what has been going on. So we've broken this down into 2 pieces. One is 5 topics of conversation to have with your children. We printed 100 copies out, so please take them on your way out. But I do want to share a few of these. So the 5 topics of conversation are family history of addiction or substance use, family history of mental health, family history of cultural differences, importance of healthy relationships, and expressing love. So the last 2 are really, really important, and I do want to spend a moment on them. Number 4 was importance of healthy relationships. We've met with a lot of teenagers who have shared that they come from a divorced family, or they don't know what a healthy relationship looks like because is their family what a healthy relationship is, or is it their best friend's family, which functions very differently, and it seems to be okay. One thing that children, students, high schoolers have said to us is that they wish they talked to their parents around what it means to be in a healthy, safe relationship. So often we believe that school systems are going to teach kids everything, absolutely everything they need. And we forget to have these really sometimes uncomfortable conversations with their teenagers. And what I'm here to tell you is that the teenagers that we have worked with are asking to have their parents talk with them about what a healthy relationship is and what it isn't. We work with many, many folks that are in relationships, and much of the substance use has been shared between 2 folks in a high school or middle school relationship. And I think that's really important. The second thing that I mentioned, number 5, is expressing love. When we talk with our high schoolers, there is a pretty big gap in how they feel like their parents love them, which is, well, my parents love me because they check in on me, they make sure that I'm getting good grades, they make sure that I'm going to my sports practice, my mom washes my clothes. And what we really heard was that it's the tactile pieces that they're seeing that love is, but they're not really feeling it. And if they're not feeling it within the home, how are they expressing that outside? So my request to all of you is that you share a conversation about what love is for you and your family. I think sometimes we think that love is only actions. But if love is only actions, then there's a huge misconception around what love really is. And I'm sorry to say, but certainly when we go to college, there are shifts in relationships and how to understand healthy relationships and how to understand healthy dynamics within relationships. So we, as a parents, have to be the ones to talk about love, to express that level of love, and to make sure that that is modeled within our households. Modeling is really hard. It's so hard. Again, I have a 13-month-old, and sometimes I swear, and I'm like, did he pick up that word? I don't know. Is that what I should be doing? Should I have him here at a late night? I don't know. But I know that when I get worried, I think about what do I want my child to do later and be later on in life, and how can I model that? And it's hard, and it's challenging, and it's necessary. So my big request for you is model the type of relationships that you want for your child in your relationships at home. The other jump here is 5 questions to ask your pediatrician. So many of the folks that Jim and I have spent 5 years meeting with have said, well, our doctor never told us, and we thought this was okay, and if the doctor's order says take all the medicine, then we're gonna take all the medicine. And you can follow all the doctor's orders, and you can still ask some questions. You still have some rights here. So the 5 questions that I would love for all of you to take into consideration the next time you meet with your doctor, pediatrician, orthodontist, any style of medical prescriber is this medication addictive? What side effects should I expect to see? How long should they be on this? Is there an alternative for pain? And when can we schedule a follow-up appointment? 2 questions here typically shock a few folks. the question is, what side effects should I be seeing? So often, we get a medication, we take it, we know what the dosage is, we make sure that we're there right in the morning, and then we take it later on at night. But what are we watching for? Are we just watching for the pain to go away? But what else should we be watching for? Should we be watching for irritability? Should we be watching for someone who's more tired or not sleeping at all? Should we be looking for medication tabs that should be at the top of the bottle, but now maybe be in the middle? We want to really have a conversation around what side effects to look for, especially with adolescents. And the last question, when should I schedule a follow-up appointment? This is really important. So often, we take the medication, and if we're feeling better, we might not finish the script. And if we're not feeling better, then we just keep on taking the script, and then there's no conversations. The script is done, the medication is done, but if you haven't checked in with your child around if they're okay, then they're going to go and satisfy that need somewhere else, usually through THC, because they don't want to have to go back to the doctor, and they're certainly not going to tell you that they want to go to the doctor, because who wants to go to the doctor? So there's two benefits to setting up a follow-up appointment. One is your child and you get to visit the doctor one more time to make sure that your child isn't in any more pain, so that they don't start quelling that pain on their own. And the other piece is that the doctor is held responsible for prescribing something more if there really is a need for more. There's been a lot of missteps, especially with the opioid epidemic, and we missed a lot, but we also weren't educated. And so I'm hoping that with these 5 opportunities to ask your doctor questions, it will decrease in the opportunity for pain management beyond the prescription that they're giving you. I know that this is not a lovely conversation to have. Vaping is not a fabulous conversation. Substance use is not a fabulous conversation. And at the same time, it's unbelievably necessary. Vaping has increased. We know that. Alcohol use has increased in some capacity, and we know that. And what we all want is for all of our youth to be well, to feel well, to know how to advocate for themselves, and to be in the best possible place for them to go to college or whatever trade they want to go to after this. And it's really, really hard to do that if you can't breathe as well. It's really, really hard to do that if you're spending outrageous amounts of money on pods. I'm sure that most of you have seen a vape, and most of you have seen pods. For every pod, those little teeny tiny pods that you may see, they're green and black, that's a pack of cigarettes. A pod can be gone in a day. Pods are sold in packs of 4. A pack of 4 can be gone in a day. So while nicotine, yes, is in cigarettes, you would never see someone smoking, a 14-year-old smoking a full pack of cigarettes an entire day. You wouldn't. You certainly wouldn't see anyone smoking 4 packs of cigarettes a day. But a vape allows you the opportunity to do so in a quiet, cool place that could be populated with other people that has no smell. And so we know the damage, we know the lung damage that has gone along with cigarette research. And all of the folks who own the cigarette companies also own, in one way or another, the vaping industry. So the same science is being used, it's just the formula for the nicotine is being increased. So I'm happy to be here. Jim and I were honored to be asked to be here. This by no means is supposed to be a scare tactic. We want it to be educational. We are here every day to answer your questions, to talk with you, to talk with your loved one, to figure out how we can support you in your household, and anything that's going on, whether it be substance use related or mental health related, because we recognize that these are really scary times and really challenging times. And we are beyond thrilled to partner with Healthy KP. Again, we work, you saw, with a lot of towns, and certainly a lot of towns are not doing this. There are not parents who want to get together and create a better atmosphere for their students. There aren't administrators saying, yes, we want to be able to create healthy conversations and healthy opportunities for our youth. And it is unbelievable that we are here. So please use us as much as you can or as much as you need, because we want to be able to support all of you. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you both for that very insightful information and feedback and sharing your personal experiences as well. So I'd like to invite the panel to come on up now. We have about 25 minutes left. We were hoping to get 40 minutes in for the panel discussion. So if the panelists can come up and join us, I'll give you a brief introduction. Mr. Paul Zinni is our superintendent of schools. And as I mentioned in the beginning, Mr. Zinni helped us launch the spirit of bringing the coalition together and trying to tackle substance use among our students. Bridie Schwalik has been a licensed mental health clinician since 2011. She has experience working with students who range in age from adolescence and up, and she specializes in working with clients with substance use disorders, trauma, depression, and anxiety. She comes from Kristen Sullivan Associates, which is right here in Rentham. So thank you both for being here. Brandon O'Neill is a senior at KPHS. We're very excited to have him on the panel. He's a SAD member and a recent Healthy KP member, and he's here to kind of share the student perspective, which I mentioned earlier has been very insightful for our coalition. Leslie Hazeldine is the first assistant clerk magistrate in Rentham District Courts. She's been there for over 25 years in the capacity of the criminal office and oversees mental health petitions. Mark Fabiano is the assistant clerk magistrate of Rentham District Courts, and while he's new to the Rentham District Courts, he brings 20 years of experience to the community as a former district attorney in Norfolk County, and he handles every type of criminal case. Mr. Todd Schwalbe, a proud KP grad, spent 4 years in the Coast Guard, 20 years as a police officer. He's a Rentham police officer and our SRO at the high school, and he has been a tremendous asset to us here in the building. Many of the students in the building are here tonight could probably identify him. He is everywhere. I feel like there's 3 of him, and he's just doing an excellent job. He's also a certified DARE program officer as well. Donna Morin is an elementary teacher and mother of a KP freshman and a nutrition and wellness expert. She's published a book called Indulging Your Way to Healthy. She's worked as a community manager for TV personalities and has since returned to her roots in the classroom, is now also running a yoga studio. I think that is, I missed anybody? I don't think I've missed anybody. Excellent. So if we could just give them a nice little welcome and thank them. So we put together a list of the 40 or so questions that folks submitted to us and tried to categorize them down and get them down into different types of questions. And the first question that we have for the panel is an open question to anybody that would like to speak. And maybe I will put my boss on the spot and ask Mr. Zinni to go ahead and open up. How has adolescent substance use played a part in your life?
Wonderful. Well, I guess I'm the first person to respond to this one, and I will say that I am not an adolescent any longer. So it's not firsthand at this point in my life, but I am a father of 2 students myself. They are now 26 and 28, so I have been where all of you as parents have been before. I know what it's like to raise 2 children, to have them go through the high school system, to know what's out there, and to be fearful for what's going on in their lives. More importantly, all of your children are my children too. I've spent 33 years in public education, and I worry every day for the students that we have in our schools. I think more than anything else, decision-making is the most important thing that we can be working on with our students, helping them to make good decisions, having them practice making good decisions. And I become very sad when I see students that have made one bad decision, and because of that, many bad things end up happening to them. So we're working very hard to help students to be good decision makers so that those bad things don't happen. So that I guess I would turn to other members of the panel to help me at this point.
Anybody else like to jump in? You know, how did youth substance use become part of your life? What does it mean to you?
Was he asking me? Oh, I could. Myself, I didn't actually, sorry, I didn't hear you at first. I just seeing it, basically, I worked patrol for 20-something years nights, and you would see a lot of things, whether it's house parties, kids underage, high school kids, and how that evolved from woods parties back in the late 90s to now kids now were sneaking alcohol to where they're able to now, a parent or parents go away for a weekend, and then the kids with the social media are able to get that out right away, and kids are able to meet together, and then at that point, you'll see the same people weekend after weekend. Some of the kids at the high school, not so much this year I've seen, but it was the same kids, and again and again, and you could see I guess I almost had like a front row seat of the escalation, whether it's marijuana, sometimes to snorting Adderall, to or alcohol, to some of things later on, harder later on. So it was definitely, you could see it happen, and some kids that just got caught up to it, and then you can see them now, and that things have completely changed.
Bridie, would you mind maybe speaking a little bit about some of the your experiences working with the adolescents and that are dealing with substance use?
Sure. So I would love to start with saying that I started my work in case management with the homeless, and I did high volume clinical assessments. And one of the questions that we would ask everyone that came in for an assessment at the different places I worked was, what was your age of first use? And there's this very surprising magic number of 12. So I was encountering all these adults that had all these trials and tribulations, and the first time they picked up a substance was age 12. And I was sort of under the impression that adolescents experimented with substances, maybe thought it was fun or cool. I was an adolescent once, and I think I thought that then. But in talking to these individuals, it was really clear that a lot of people, as Jim had mentioned, people, and Jen as well, people felt out of place, or they were experiencing symptoms of really a lot of stress, worry, maybe depression, and they were looking for anything and everything that could take that away. So I more recently switched and am really pleased and honored to be able to work with adolescents. I felt like when I was working with chronically homeless, I was a little late to the game, especially hearing that number, age of 12. If we had somebody that didn't start, if their first use was maybe 16, it was like news within the agency. We were just really surprised someone had started that late. So that's kind of been my introduction and experience with adolescent substance use.
Thank you.
I mean, I shared my story, so I won't go on for too long, but one of the things that jumps out is that Jen mentioned that, I think it was you that mentioned, maybe it wasn't you, but we're talking about kids wanting to belong, and I know that the reporting back from my son that's been impacted, and I hear this a lot, is, I just wanted to belong. I was thinking there was going to be some incredibly difficult answer to figure out. Well, that's something I could have picked up on when he was young. What he did really well was really unhealthy. And so I think back to my own youth, that type of risk-taking and everything was popular, and that made me cool back then. So why wouldn't that follow now? And, I just follow up by saying it's alarming how many of our youth are at risk right now. You talked about progressing on. That was one of the alarming things to me. Was I was shocked to find out how quickly it progressed from marijuana to other substances. So one of the things that impacted me was kind of like post-traumatic stress. One last thing. Another thing that I observe a lot is I will hear from people like me that like to shop for organic foods and everything else, but then say things like, well, it's only weed. And can you imagine out looking at an apple and trying to figure out whether there's pesticides on it or not, and then letting your loved one go out and buy marijuana, which is wholly unregulated if you're buying it off the street, and virtually unregulated in a retail shop? It just doesn't make any sense. So I just find this incongruence between some of the messaging that we give to our youth.
Thank you. I'd like to maybe shift in another direction. Maybe we could speak a little bit to the legal aspects. We've got some folks here from the Rentham courts, and if you wouldn't mind just sharing some of the experience you've had or some of the insight or perspective that you might be able to share with us. If you guys wouldn't mind using the microphones a little bit, because it is being recorded tonight, so thank you.
Actually, I'll just pull them forward.
So again, I'm Mark Fabiano. I'm an assistant clerk magistrate at Rentham District Court. I live in Norfolk. I have a third grader and a kindergartner in the public schools in Norfolk, so it won't be too long before I'm a KP parent. My career has been spent working in the district courts, which are, the community courts. And, to be frank, the vast majority of the people that end up in the district court are not career criminals, but they are regular folks who have issues with substance abuse and make the bad decisions that go along with substance abuse a lot of times. So I have a little bit of a unique perspective because I was an assistant district attorney. I started out my career prosecuting people, and then for 13 years I was a defense attorney, and now I'm sort of back in the middle dealing with these folks from a different perspective. So I can say that we're dealing with adults at the district court level. We're not dealing with juveniles. But from my experience with many of my clients with substance use disorder, a lot of them did begin using, at 12, 13 years old. And they might not start making the huge mistakes until later in life, when they're 18, 19 years old, when they're outside of the juvenile justice system and into the adult justice system. So I think, I think being here and trying to speak to you folks, who parents that are, coming in a lot earlier, could have a big effect on your children's futures when they do get to that weird stage between adolescence and adulthood. So I think that's one of the reasons that I'm here.
Just as a brief overview of what the clerk's office does at the Rentham Court, any court actually, we're the official record keepers of the court. So what that means, if somebody is doing a background check or anything, something may show up on their record. So even if it's from 1975, 1989, 2012, they may say, can you get a copy of their record or their docket sheet of what happened on this particular case? And just recently, I had to look through juvenile books, and back before computers, whatever, believe it or not, they're old books that you have to flip through, you have to run, and it's manually alphabetically. So the B tab is any B name, the C tab is any C name. So when I was looking through a book from, say, 1975, trying to find something, and it was a juvenile book, I was looking for a particular name, and I'm like, I recognize that last name, that last name, that last name. So it just goes to show that a juvenile from 1975 was now an adult that I knew when I started working at the court in the late 90s. So it just means that I think it's important to get to the kids early to see what, like Jen was saying and Jim was saying, is what's going on with them? Why are they doing this? So I don't have to see their names, if I'm at the court in 2035, their grandkids or their kids' names, just so it's kind of stop the cycle earlier enough on, so we're not seeing the same names, whether it's on a computer or in an old docket book that was handwritten. So that's why I like to be involved.
Thank you. Would you guys mind maybe elaborating a little bit about the social host law and kind of explaining to parents that might not be aware of what the social host law is? Anybody from police or courts?
We can, or
You want me to, I could give you the, not the legal, I just know that you're, like I mentioned, house parties. If you're a child, you go away to your New Hampshire house for the weekend, and, obviously, this is the thing where you become responsible for actions at your house. Social house, you can't let people come over and drink, because now you become responsible for them, and you're responsible for their actions. So if you have a graduation party, and you decide that it's okay to let some kids drink, and I'm just gonna take the keys because I want to be the cool parent, and they get away, you are held responsible for that. So there's a lot of actions that, as parents, you're not allowed to let children do on your property, and it's also when you're there and when you're not there, if that kind of helps. So in other words, you can't say I didn't know my kid was having a party. Well, if you leave a teenage kid home for a weekend alone, there's a good chance there's going to be a house party. Based on my experience, there's going to be a good chance that there's going to be a house party, and that you are responsible for that. regardless of you there or not. Anybody else wants to back me up?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that there are obviously criminal consequences to allowing children to drink at your home and letting people become intoxicated. Furnishing alcohol to a minor is a crime. In Massachusetts, it's punishable by up to a year in jail and a $2,000 fine. So just so everyone knows. And then there are also other criminal consequences that could come from having a party and letting underage people drink at your home. There's a statute preventing reckless endangerment of children. So that's actually punishable by up to 2.5 years in jail. So a parent that throws a wild party and a teenager might leave the party and get sexually assaulted or injured, the parent could actually be on the hook for that reckless endangerment, putting that child in danger of actually being harmed or being sexually assaulted. So those are some of the criminal consequences.
They're also, you're opening yourself up to civil liability too, if I'm not correct. You can be sued for later on for damages and things like that. If someone leaves your house at a party, then the parents have the right. So it's a huge responsibility, I think. And my kids are like, sorry, Mr. Fabiano's like that. My kids are still in the elementary school, so I haven't hit that part yet. But something we're really going to have to think about later on is leaving them home alone to, take that chance. Because even if the kids don't have a tendency to want to maybe have one or two friends get together. I mean, some of the students could probably speak to this. How fast does the word travel? Does it get out? So-and-so's parents are gone. And then they might not intend to have 10 people over, but 20 people show up, and then it gets out of control.
Tangentially, there are a few other things to think about when we talk about the host liability piece of this. Number one, some of the research that we've done when we talk with students, we're trying to find protective factors. So in addition to the information that Mr. Lewis shared with you earlier about the number of students who are engaging in some of these behaviors, we also try to talk with students who have chosen not to engage in those behaviors and to look for the reasons why they made different choices. And then to see if there are ways to encourage those appropriate choices down the road. And so one of the questions we asked is, why did you choose not to get involved with drugs or alcohol? And the number one reason that we hear from students that they respond to is they do not want to disappoint their parents. As much as we sometimes think that our students are not listening to us, that our children are not listening to us, they do care about what you say and how you feel about these things. And so when we send that message that it's okay to have this party because I know my child's going to drink anyway, so I'm just going to make sure that they do it safely, and I've heard that said to me many, many times over the years. You are sending a message that it is okay to do this. When you tell them point blank it is not okay, they hear that message too. And so it's an important one to say. There are other protective factors, like when students have goals in life and they perceive that drinking will inhibit those goals. That's another key one. And also their friendship peer groups. So that's why the schools have worked so hard to make sure that there are ways for students to get involved, whether it's music or sports or other activities. Getting involved, creating strong peer groups is important as well. On the other side of that, when we look at this piece here for the social host liability, we know that when parents and students engage together, and it's something that I heard from our speakers earlier, having those conversations, those are key. And brain development. Research now shows that the brain is still developing into our 25th year. And we know that when the younger a student is to participate in this kind of behavior, the more likely they are to be addicted to those substances later in life. The longer they hold off on using alcohol, on using any other substance, the less likely they are that they will ever be addicted to it in the future. And so we need to make sure that we keep them protected from that reason as well.
I just wanted to add one thing that the night that my son, well, let me just back up. My son reported to me that he had been smoking weed with other parents, okay? But to my horror, the night that he was involved in an accident, he was using with another father and son, okay? And I promise I'm just a regular Little League coach and dad. I mean, this was right here in the neighboring community. It happens. And so, I mean, there's an enormous moral responsibility we all have, an ethical responsibility. And I wish, and I'm speaking now to the kids, I wish that the other young people that were with him had spoken up. If you're going to a party and they're telling you to drop keys in a fishbowl and you don't like it, go home and tell your parents. I promise you, you'll save somebody's life. It won't put you in trouble, but you can prevent the next tragedy. I really think it's important that we include our youth and make them co-caretakers of each other, because this is bad. And imagine my horror at a local private school that my now 18-year-old is at, and I walked into a party and they didn't know who I was, they didn't know my lived experience, and I see a fishbowl because I was the dad that walks in anyway, even though they say don't come in, and there's the mom with the fishbowl. I came within, I mean, I was furious. So it happens. Sorry, a fishbowl to put the keys in. You know, they got a bowl, a goldfish bowl, put the keys in, the kids all go down and party, and then you know, anybody that comes back, they keep the keys and make sure the kids don't leave. It happens, and it happens a lot.
And I know that we want to move on real quick, just one thing.
Yeah, sorry.
2 months ago, the Safe Coalition has a community forum where anyone from the community can come, including parents. And a dad from a local high school came, and he has 2 sons that are athletes. And he shared with us, and he was pretty direct with Jim and I, that he would like us to focus on educating parents on alcohol use with their children, because both sons continue to go to parties with alcohol that the parents are supporting and are allowing the kids to sleep over. I know that we've talked this whole table about the relationship between parents and their children and substance use, and this literally happened in a pretty public way to us a couple months ago. Again, really modeling what you want your child to be able to do in the future. No means no. The law says no. Parents need to model that for their children, and really, really educate their children and highlight to them how important it is to look out for each other. Call 911, get help, talk to your parents. If you feel like one of your friends is in danger, get the help that they need.
And I just want to add one more quick thing about what Mark had said about the criminal consequences to parents or even a minor person who may provide alcohol to a person under the age of 18. And there's the furnishing law, but there's also, as Mark indicated, the reckless endangerment of a child charge. So this, to simplify it, there's three elements to it, and I'll just read. So what I'm going to read real quick is we call it jury instruction. So if the case is in a jury trial and you know you're on the jury and you have to, and somebody being charged of reckless endangerment of a child under 18, these are 3 things. The 3 things that the judge says the Commonwealth has to prove. First, that the defendant engaged in conduct which created a substantial and unjustifiable risk of serious bodily injury or sexual abuse to the named victim. Second, that the defendant's conduct was wanton or reckless. And third, that the alleged victim was under the age of 18 years old. And that's it. So think about it. If you have that fishbowl or, just let me know what you guys are doing. You don't know what they're doing. They could be falling down the stairs. They could be running in the woods. They could be, running in the middle of the street because they hear the police are coming. Those are all things that have happened that parents have been charged. And that's, and I don't mean to scare anybody, but think about that. That's 3 simple elements that you have to prove to a jury, and that's it. And it's just really important that parents and even older siblings realize that they are responsible for children in their house. Not only their own, but others. And think about that phone call that a parent may have to make if something like that happened, that there was an injury, and that not only would they have to make that phone call to another parent, but there are huge consequences to their own livelihood with their own family if they're criminally charged and found guilty of that consequence.
Thank you all for your answers to that. So we are running short on time, so we have been able to answer through some of our responses a couple of the different questions, but one of the questions that really surfaced was, how do students actually deal with making that choice or dealing with peer pressure, for example. And one of the reasons why we asked Brandon to be here was to maybe share some insights as to why it is that he chooses not to use alcohol and maybe some of the ways that he manages dealing with any kind of peer pressure if students or friends were to ask him to partake. So Brandon, if you wouldn't mind.
So in the community, I've been peer pressured a lot with like people wanting me to do stuff, and I always say no. I'm really against like substance abuse, and I think that really started at home with my parents. Ever since like I've been really young, they've always instructed like super strict rules on drugs and the consequences of that and like what that can lead to. And I realized that myself, and then I wanted to separate myself from friends that would go to parties and said I'd maybe be home studying or fixing my car. And I really think that getting a new hobby like fixing my car or studying at home instead of partying really helped me like get to go like to the college I wanted to go to. And it also allowed me to get better friends that weren't always talking about drugs and actually interested in stuff that I wanted to do. I think the biggest thing for me was when the kids wanted me to do stuff, I would ask them why they wanted to do that and what their reasoning was for wanting to do that. I was like, why do you need that to have fun? Why can't you just be yourself and have fun? And a lot of kids really couldn't answer that question, or they'd say that it made them feel good. And I didn't respect their opinion on that, because I don't think that you need drugs to have fun. Just a regular conversation with a couple of friends does the same thing for me that it does for other people with drugs.
That's excellent. So just to kind of recap some of the things that I just heard him say, that the choices that he makes of the folks that he hangs out with, the students that he hangs out with that have similar interests. Another way is to find a hobby, right? High expectations from his parents and his parents modeling that. So all 3 or 4 of those ideas right there, I think, are common themes when we find students who are choosing not to use substances.
Do you recall when your parents started talking to you about drugs and alcohol? It was way before high school, right? Was it before middle school?
Probably like 4th grade, 3rd grade, maybe even younger than that. Yeah.
Yeah, I find students who are that are surely not using. They typically, when I meet the parents, you can see that connection of choosing to live a healthy lifestyle. Any other panelists like to maybe share any other insights with regards to dealing with peer pressure or being able to say no or avoid, or anything else that you might want to add?
I think when we have a peer-to-peer group that meets on Wednesdays, and we talk about this a lot. And I think when we provide education to our youth around how they could really be harmed, they have the capacity to make their own choices in really challenging situations. So, we've heard that when kids find out that they're not going to be as tall as they wanted to be, or their skin isn't going to be as clear as they want it to be, or they're not going to go to the college of choice that they've wanted to go to since 2nd grade because they got a starter jacket for Notre Dame and they've always wanted to go to Notre Dame. I think that when we're able to really break it down with the kids around how this is going to impact their medical health and then their overall health, and the hopes and the dreams and the desires that they had, there can be a shift. And that doesn't mean that every kid who tries has a really challenging experience. It just means that we want to provide as many opportunities to empower our youth to make decisions that are going to help them in the future. And I think that's been something that we've learned with the peer-to-peer group, that empowering our youth to make their own decisions with real education has made a difference.
If I could just build off what Jen just said about making decisions, it's never too young for a child to make some decisions. I think sometimes as parents we want to insulate our children to make sure that they stay safe, and so we worry about them and we make decisions on their behalf that we think are going to keep them safe. And sometimes our most powerful lessons are when we make a mistake and we then are able to learn from it afterwards. And so when we as adults are able to help control that decision, I can remember one as a parent when my son insisted that he didn't want to take a jacket, and we said, well, that's fine. If you don't want to take a jacket, don't take a jacket. And later that night he was cold. Well, okay, you made that decision, now you're cold. No, I'm not going to turn the heat up higher in the car. You'll just have to get over it. But we sometimes insulate them. We insist they take the jacket anyway, and so they don't necessarily see that the decision that they made that maybe wasn't a good one had a consequence. So then they believe that their decisions don't have consequences later on. It's okay to fail if we learn from that and move on from that. And so empowering kids to fail but learn from it is a good thing, not a bad one.
Thank you. I also would like to ask, so making choices and healthy choices is an important part of this process of students maybe not using. How does nutrition and the choices that we use for our diet, I'd like to ask Donna if you could maybe step in and talk to us about how does it affect our biology and what have you.
Thank you. So I am a yoga teacher. I'm not good at speaking fast, so gong me whenever I need to be done. I also created a handout here so I have more information for afterwards. So it's important to know first, I think, that our food has changed drastically in the last 30 years. Our food industry now is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and approximately 12 food companies now decide what food gets grown and what food we eat. Doesn't seem fair, but that's how it is right now. So there's a lot of very fascinating science, though, that's coming out that's starting to show relationships. As a yoga teacher, I'm fascinated that Western science now just seems to be starting to catch up to where Eastern medicine was or where ancient culture medicine was for so many years. And really the way it was always seen is that we are whole entire organisms, right? And one part of our bodies is absolutely 100% related to the other part of the body. In fact, when we study anatomy, we learn that pain in your right shoulder could absolutely be associated to tightness in your left foot. So it's amazing. But we're starting to see this and recognize this now in biology. So whether it's epigenetics or nutrigenomics or microbiology or nutritional psychiatry, we're starting to understand now the connection between the gut. And when we say the gut, we mean the stomach, the esophagus, the large intestine, small intestine, and colon, the whole digestive piece, how that is related to what happens up here too. We used to just treat ourselves from the neck up and from the neck down, right? But now we're starting to understand that there is a major connection here. And two of the most interesting pathways that have recently been discovered is first inflammation. I'm sure you've heard a lot about that. So if you picture inflammation, if you were to cut your hand, for instance, you would notice around the cut that area automatically starts to get red, right? So that is your body automatically sending in the first responders, you might say, to do their job and protect that little cut from any other germs around there. You need to have the second part after that. And those are in your body the things like antioxidants, right? You've probably heard that term. Those come in afterwards and help with the healing process. Where do we find antioxidants? In plant foods like fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds. Things that we're not really eating a lot of these days, right? Because we have these multi-billion-dollar industries that are telling us we should be eating other things that are colorful and fluorescent green and full of sugar, right? Those are not the things that our bodies need to help us to heal, though. So we're living with chronic inflammation. And when your body is always trying to heal, then it's not going to thrive, right? It can't thrive if it's always putting its energy to healing. All right, so that's one point. The other part is that the gut now is being recognized as what's called the enteric nervous system. It's a second nervous system that's in your gut. All right, and so your gut communicates with your brain all the time, whether it's through the vagus nerve that travels from the gut all the way to the brain, or whether it's through hormones, which are chemical messengers in your body. So one of those are going to communicate with your brain. Your gut actually produces certain hormones like serotonin. Serotonin is known as the happy hormone, right? Helps us to find well-being in our lives. Melatonin is produced both in the brain and in the gut. Melatonin helps us to sleep, right? If we don't get enough sleep, how do we feel? We don't feel good. What do we eat? We don't eat well, right? Cortisol regulates our sleep and wake cycle, all right? Also produced in the gut. And then GABA. GABA is a hormone that helps to play a role in reducing anxiety, all produced in the gut. All right? The only way that we keep our gut healthy is by making sure that we're getting the nutrients that we need. And the nutrients that we really need, the micronutrients that fight disease, are the nutrients that are found in plant foods. All right? That's your greens, your vegetables, your nuts, your seeds, your beans. All right? And now, how do we eat? You know I ate processed foods pretty much my whole life until about 10 years ago. And my health was disastrous. I was considering back surgery. I had chronic asthma. I nearly died one time. I was hospitalized for 5 days with pneumonia, and I had cervical cancer. So I was a mess for much of my life, and I never knew any of this information. No one ever told me. I mean, you know that you're not supposed to eat too much sugar or you get cavities, right? That kind of stuff you hear. You don't hear about this stuff, and so I was a mess with my health. About 10 years ago, actually 15 now, my son was born. He's a freshman here now. And he literally saved my life because I started researching nutrition. I wanted to make this thing live, right? I didn't know what to do with this thing. So I started to research nutrition. How do I feed this thing? And I started to learn things that I never knew. So I started to change my life. And now I have biked in the MS ride from Quincy to Provincetown 4 years in a row. That's 150 miles. I've climbed Mount Washington to raise money for breast cancer. I've had so many experiences now that I never could have had in my life before that because of the way I was eating and because of my lifestyle. So that's why I'm so passionate about this now, and I'm happy to talk further with you. I don't want to take any more time. I have the handouts. I have 5 books. I don't know how we can raffle them off and give them away later, but that's my spiel. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, I wrote that.
So in the essence of time, I thank you for being patient and letting us go over for 15 minutes. If there's anybody in the audience that has a question that they'd like to ask the panel, we'd like to take a couple minutes to allow that to happen. Go ahead.
So my kids are younger, they're in elementary school and Rentham, so I'm not familiar with what KP does. But I happen to be running one morning on a Sunday on the radio. It's just the community programs, and it was a radio health net one that talked about the opioid abuse. And there's a program run, I think it's called Prevention, run by the University of Montreal. And it kind of resonates with a lot of what all you're saying. One is that prevention, or just say no, doesn't work. And their premise is there's certain personality types that are prone to risky behavior or using drugs. And so what they suggest is giving these surveys where they can identify the kids with risky behaviors. I'm going to read because I have to send an email. The 4 risky personality types are sensation-seeking, impulsiveness, anxiety-sensitive, and negative thinking, which I think all, in a way, come back to, you mentioned fitting in, Jen mentioned fitting in, Julie mentioned fitting in, whereas Brendan, I feel like you have the confidence that these others lack. And so anyway, they recommend giving these surveys with simple questions like, would you ever consider skydiving, as an example? And then what they do is, based on their surveys, they group the kids with those like behaviors and train them on knowing how their built personality traits they work on ways to change the way they deal with their personality defaults as a way of preventing them seeking substances
Yeah.
take away whatever,
That's very insightful, yeah.
so I just didn't know if like, you guys have ever heard of that, or if anything is being like considered other than, like, I know in Rentham I ask, it's all prevention, say no, dare, and like, I just feel like. what we're
Certain
seeing
personalities,
in
yeah.
Elementary school where it's just Rentham, just Plainfield, just Norfolk, to a time where you go to middle school at this age where you're trying to discover yourself, trying to have friends, where you go into a regional school with all these new people, and I feel like there's this, and 12, right, is what, 7th grade, so right in around that area where, sorry, I'm losing train of my thought,
No,
but,
yeah,
like,
so I'm gonna pose that to the group, and maybe Jen, if you wouldn't mind
Yeah.
just kind of leading off.
So,
Thank you for that question.
I think I'm so happy that you shared that. So, in the U.S., we have something similar. A doctor in San Diego partnered with Kaiser Health, and they created what now is known as the ACEs study. And the ACEs study is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. It's a questionnaire with 10 questions, and depending on how someone ranks with those 10 questions, can highlight how much more vulnerable they are to chronic diseases, both medical, psychiatric, and mental health, substance use. And so many school systems across the United States, pediatricians' offices will provide an ACEs exam to someone, and then we can really see how vulnerable someone may be in which category. And so the ACEs study is becoming much more popular in our area. We at the Safe Coalition are actually doing that now. We're launching in April a vaping program for high school aged youth, and we start the program with the ACEs study so we can provide a baseline and a style of education to every child that participates in the program. I would definitely recommend looking up ACEs, and part of our role is to work with school administrators on opportunities to provide more resources to school systems. And so ACEs is certainly something that we're going in the direction of, and it sounds very similar to what you've mentioned, but I think that we're really interested in looking into that study.
So do
Thank-
any school systems in Mass use that now?
Oh, yeah.
But at what level? Like, I feel like high school is too. Right?
I think that some school systems do it, and then some school systems ask that when students go to their pediatrician's office for their school physical, they get it done there, or their annual physical. But elementary school, I mean, the earlier that you can take an ACEs study, the better.
Great, thank you.
That is actually online. I took it for myself, and I liked it when visually, and I had a bunch of things as well. It's a great program to make online. But also, Jim, you should tell them a lot to the parents here. How do their kids get involved with your curriculum?
Come on down.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Safe Coalition has on Wednesday nights, we have a high school peer-to-peer group, and we meet and we talk about things that are going on. Most specifically, we follow a program called Why Try. Why Try is a 10-module program that really works with someone and what's going on in their own lives. One of the modules is wearing a label. What labels do we carry right now, and what labels would you rather carry? Are you the middle child? Yes, but what label would you rather? I'd rather be known as the funny one in the family. I mean, it's light and funny and airy, but really we get down to how do we build a capacity to love ourselves in a really vulnerable middle high school age. So we meet the second and fourth Wednesday at the Safe office. And then we also are launching the vaping cessation program for high school aged youth on Thursdays and Fridays. But get our cards, call us,
And
come
it's
see the
high
office.
school with a small, in other words, there's no one high school we're affiliated, it's high school age. you know,
Yes.
That come, and you can tell it's really fun.
Oh yeah, I do it. I'm the one who does it.
It's
so.
great food.
And there's great snacks.
Excellent. Well, I want to say thank you so much. We're going to wrap the evening up. I wish we could continue on, but we're moving on to 8:30 now, and I'm sure folks are wanting to get home. Thank you so much for your patience and your active listening, and feel free to visit with the service providers, and please check out the Hidden in Plain Sight before you take off. If you could just give our panelists one warm welcome. Thank you.